I am talking to State Senator Bruce Tarr. Hi, Senator. How are you today?
I'm very well, Heather. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I know we have
Good.
a lot to get through, so let's start with the data collection issue that you brought up.
Great. So this is really important, Heather. You know that despite the pandemic, we are still passing pieces of legislation. And yesterday was an important day in the Senate because we passed the data collection bill, and the House had passed a version of this earlier in the week. So now it's going to the governor's desk. We actually agreed on what the final bill should look like. And I won't get too deep into the details, except to tell you that the idea here is we need to collect data about different kinds of healthcare settings and how they're serving people, because we want to make sure that no one is being disadvantaged because of their geography or their race or their income level or a whole host of factors. We really need to make sure everyone's treated fairly and equally with regard to healthcare, and that's particularly true right now. So the idea of the bill is to require a whole host of pieces of information to be gathered and then to be posted on the web so that we can all look at it. And that's sort of part one of the bill, because it allows us all to look at gaps right now in real time and make sure we address them. But then there's a second piece of the bill that looks more toward the future, and that creates a committee, a task force, to look at disparities in healthcare so that we can prevent them from happening in the first place on a going forward basis. So this is a really important bill that was motivated by what we've been seeing in the COVID-19 pandemic, because we know it's affected people differently based on a number of different factors. We want to know what those factors are, and we want to know what we can do to address them, again, to make sure that everyone gets treated effectively and fairly. So I'm really pleased that we're able to get the bill done. It's on the governor's desk. I suspect he will sign it, but I don't know that for sure as we speak.
Well, that sounds like a really important piece of legislation, and good to know that you're still getting that sort of stuff passed, that those bills passed. Could you just give me an example of what a gap would be?
So a gap might be, for instance, if there isn't sufficient testing in a particular healthcare facility, and as a result, people that are served by that facility might not be getting tested. And what would be even worse is if testing wasn't available as it should be to a particular group, either an age cohort or an ethnic cohort, or some group of people that aren't getting the kind of testing that everyone else is getting. That's something we want to fix right away. And so we need the data to be able to determine if it's happening.
And you're referring to COVID-19 testing, right?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's move on, because I know we have a lot to talk about. And you wanted to talk about the next phase 2 of the governor's reopening plan.
Sure. So in the office, Heather, we're getting calls constantly about people wanting to know what reopening looks like. And we understand that. We all do, and we're all making our way through this. And what happened today that's significant is the governor and lieutenant governor and the Reopening Advisory Board released the guidance for restaurants and hotels and motels. Now, that doesn't mean that they can open yet. That reopening is scheduled for phase 2, and the earliest phase 2 could happen is right around June 8th. But what it does mean is people can get a look at what they're going to need to do to be able to reopen, and it's very wise to give them a runway so that they're not being told the day before they can reopen what they need to do. And so there are some issues that are pretty common to every business, and that is having personal protective equipment, having sanitizer, having gloves. And so when you get to issues like that, we want to make sure that people have time to get those things and to be ready. So what's happening today is people are getting their look at the official guidance, and it will all be up on the Mass.gov website for what it needs to be. And one of the things that I've been involved in, and I'm really particularly proud of people from our region on this, Heather, because they've really been working to inform the advisory board. So for instance, the Beauport Hotel put together a pro forma plan on what the hotel plan should look like, and a lot of that information got incorporated into the official guidance. We've heard from a lot of restaurateurs in our region, and so one of the things they told us was that the first thought about this was we should restrict restaurants to the capacity that they're licensed for. So let's say they're licensed for 100 people, we would allow 25% of them into the restaurant. What the restaurants told us is that's not the best idea. The best idea might be to look at what they can physically accomplish given the space constraints they have. And so what we learned today is a little bit about what that performance standard is going to look like, separation between tables, not having a line to try to wait for a table, the requirement that you wear a mask when you come into a restaurant and when you may use the restroom. Obviously, you're not going to wear the mask when you're eating, but in a lot of other situations you need to. And also the thought that's in this guidance about trying to open first with outside dining so that it opens up a lot more possibilities. And truthfully, I think this is going to be a challenge because every restaurant, I think, is going to be looking for a place where they can go outside. And some of them don't necessarily have a lot of outside space. So I think we're going to see a lot of creativity around this between restaurants and boards of health and other municipal officials to say, okay, maybe we can take a little bit of the sidewalk. How is that going to work? I know in the extreme, some people might say, let's close down a street. I'm not sure you'll see that on Cape Ann, but you probably will see it in other parts of the state. And of course, there's an issue related to that, and that is, as you know, that restaurants that hold liquor licenses, if they're going to modify the premises, need to get approval for that. And it's a huge sticking point because right now, the local licensing board gives preliminary approval to that modification, but then the ABCC, the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, has to give final approval. And that can take months. So we're trying to move a piece of legislation to expedite it and give more power to the local licensing authority and less requirement to go through state bureaucracy so that we can speed that up. But the long and the short of it is today, those two sectors, restaurants and hotels and motels, are getting their look at what it's going to take to reopen as soon as reopening is possible.
Well, let me ask you, people must be concerned about the supply chain in terms of PPE because they will require so many masks, if not gloves, and in some cases maybe gowns in terms of cleaning hotels and motels. Is that a concern?
I am so glad you asked that question because it's really important and it's still a challenge. So the first iteration of this is that on Mass.gov, there is a page that lists all of the Massachusetts suppliers of those things so that there's a place to go and see who you can reach out to. And I think that's a really good idea. The second thing is the Mass Technology Collaborative and others are working on standing up more production of these things in the state. And in fact, they recently gave out almost $10 million in grants to businesses that want to make PPE and gloves and other things that we're going to need. I actually happen to think we should go a little bit further. And here's my concern. We have a situation where healthcare providers need PPE. There's no question about it. And it's been a struggle. As you know, I chair the working group on supply chain issues and price gouging for the Senate. And we've been watching this very closely. And our concern has been that as healthcare providers are just catching up with regard to PPE, now the market's going to be flooded with all of these businesses who need it to be able to open and survive. So what I think we should do, and we're floating this idea and it's in its infancy, is have a facility whereby the state can aggregate this demand and do group purchasing and then allow businesses to purchase the equipment from a centralized clearinghouse at cost, not with a profit. And that way we could coordinate because the state's already doing procurement that's helping healthcare providers. I think we should be doing more with businesses. Now, obviously, we don't want to create more bureaucracy than we need to, but it's an idea that I think we need to continue to stay focused on.
I really agree with you. I mean, there are going to be so many barriers to reopening for all these businesses, and that alone will be such an impediment. So I think this is a place where the state could certainly support the efforts. So let's talk about the unemployment insurance issues.
So unemployment insurance has been reaching levels of claims, Heather, that we've never seen before. And obviously a lot of good people are doing a lot of good work, literally thousands of calls a day being handled by the folks at the Division of Unemployment Insurance. And our staffs are doing a lot of these calls, both my staff and Representative Ferrante's staff and our colleagues are trying to help people through this. But something particularly insidious has developed, and I really want to talk about it. So we've been learning that there is a scam going on, and the scam involves what we think is a group of perpetrators from Nigeria, and they are applying for unemployment benefits in the names of people that they've obtained through data breaches. And so the way that we've heard about this is people are getting a letter that's saying, you know, your claim's been approved or your claim's been received, and they either never applied or they had already applied and were getting a benefit. And so this is really bad at so many levels, and we want to do something about it. So the thing that I wanted to talk about mainly right now is how to report it and let people know if you suspect that this is happening. And so I've got a phone number here. I very rarely use notes, but I want to get this right. So first of all, the phone number at the Division of Unemployment Assistance is 877-626-6800. So that's 877-626-6800. Also, there is a website where you can go to report this kind of fraud, and it's mass.gov/unemployment-fraud. So again, that's mass.gov/unemployment-fraud. And it's really important that we try to get our hands around this and make sure that we understand it, because what's happening is this is a system that's being strained, and we can't afford to have money going to folks who are perpetrating fraud. People really need this. And so we want to make sure to try to stay on top of it. The other negative thing that's happened through this, Heather, is that now the folks at the Unemployment Insurance Division, they have to ask for additional information, and they have to verify that information. So it's slowing down the claims and the ability of people to get unemployment insurance. So we want to make sure to tell people about this. And obviously, if anybody has any questions, they can call us at 617-722-1600. But first and foremost, we want them to speak to the experts on this and let them know if they suspect they've been a victim of it.
And I just want to add, it's so sad in so many ways, but the need for additional information when one is applying for the unemployment insurance can feel as if it's just that much more of a barrier, right? And particularly if maybe forms of ID are not, people don't have that many forms of ID. So that is, it's just so sad. And it's good to hear you talking about this legitimately. So thank you.
And I really want to reemphasize the fact that we're here to help. And so there are 3 people in my office. Everyone has been dealing with this, but in particular, Peter Cosenza, who was a native of Gloucester. I'm sure you've come across in his other life as a cook and chef. He's dealing with this, Vicki Morey and Jennifer McCullough, and they are all spending a lot of time on unemployment insurance issues. So we're here to help too, and it's unfortunate, but we'll get through it.
Is this happening in any other states, Bruce?
Yes, and it, I believe it first started on the West Coast in a couple of states. It isn't happening in every state, and we've seen some maps that are showing individual places, and it tends to be places where there has been a known data breach, and that's where the information is being harvested to make these false applications.
And you have one other important piece of information for constituents, right?
I do. And so the other thing I want to let people know about, and it's in some ways similar, but it's more good news than talking about the unemployment insurance fraud, and that is people are now getting stimulus payments. And if the IRS doesn't have some of your information, they are mailing you a debit card. And the problem is the envelope it comes in looks like junk mail. And so we're really concerned that people may be getting their stimulus payment not realizing that there's a card inside, a debit card, and they may be discarding it. And we don't want that to happen. So we've been thinking about this all day in our office, and we think one of the best things we could do is take some pictures of what the card looks like and what the envelope looks like. And as we speak, my staff using the utmost in technology, and you'd be pretty surprised if you saw what we're doing, but we're trying to take those those images and post them on social media, and we'll share them with you as well so that people can have a sense of what this actually looks like, so that when it comes, you don't throw it away.
Yeah, we will definitely find a way to post that image into this interview. So let me ask you, Senator, how are you feeling these days? And do you miss your constituents? What does it feel like you're always so, visible in the community at every picnic and every civic event. How is it feeling for you?
It's been interesting, Heather, because my world has changed, like life has for so many others, if not all of us. So it is different. I wind up being here at the State House in the evenings because there are no community events happening to be able to physically attend. So I'm here more in the evening than I normally would be. The usual places where I interact with people are not available right now. But all of that being said, I have to tell you, I feel really lucky to be able to serve at this point in our history and to be able to do the things we're able to do to help people. So I'm still very upbeat, very positive. I'm blessed with a tremendous staff, most of whom are working from home. Only a few are here at the State House with me. But I do miss some of those other aspects of life as a public servant. And that really came into focus this past weekend, where normally I'd be going to a number of Memorial Day ceremonies, which I think are extremely important. And most communities did not have them. Some did them with video, and I really appreciate your sharing the video that we produced right here in Memorial Hall at the State House. But that's been one of the things that's changed about my life, and it's something that I've had to wrestle with. And I want to tell you something else. It's a little bit more of a personal nature, Heather, and I think you'd appreciate this. I have a 94-year-old aunt who lives next to me on Essex Avenue. And prior to COVID-19, she would go to a different restaurant every morning for breakfast in Gloucester. And that was a big part of her life. And on Sundays, I would join her at a restaurant. And it was always a great way to reconnect and talk about whatever was happening in our lives. And right now, we can't go to a restaurant. So that's been a little bit difficult, but we're still in touch. She lives right next door. So like many of us, we're experiencing changes, and there is hardship and there is sacrifice. But this very much has to be a united effort, because we're seeing the effects of flattening the curve. We have hospital capacity. We are looking at reopening, and we can't let our guard down. So life has changed. But it's still, I find it to be gratifying to be doing what I'm doing, and we're communicating with people in different ways. And as you know, while I love a microphone, I am technologically challenged. So without people on my staff to be able to hook up all this stuff, I would be in worse shape than I am.
Well, someday we will have a really clean connection with our Zoom calls. I think we'll get that eventually. So thank you so much for speaking to us, and thank you for all the hard work you are putting in that State House. It's really, I think your constituents really value it, and we loved your Memorial Day message. That was a lovely video, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We sent that kind of last minute, so I appreciate your being able to get it up and running. And I just want to thank you and Corey and everybody, Eric, everybody at 1623, because when I am home, I oftentimes am watching and particularly enjoy a lot of your segments. So, this is a time where we're separated physically, but we're connected by things like 1623. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you for that. We really were pleased to be able to step into this, what felt like a need at that in early March. So, well, we look forward to talking to you again soon.
As do I. Look forward to talking with you, and thank you again so much.
And I can't wait to have breakfast with you and your aunt.
Oh, she would love that. I will tell her about that over the weekend.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Heather. You too.
Thanks.